In the village of Nyos, children played barefoot beneath an orange sunset, and women carried pots of water home from the lake. Life was as it always had been, simple, rhythmic, and unaware. But then came the sound, a low rumble, like thunder trapped under the earth. Heads turned toward the lake. The water, usually a placid mirror of the sky, rippled and darkened. The foul stench of rot crept into the air. In the silence that followed, the villagers felt it, a wrongness in their lungs. Babies wailed, chickens flapped wildly, then fell still. The cows in the field staggered, their eyes rolling white. And then it was everywhere. An invisible wave rolled over the land. Children dropped mid-laugh, crumpling as if boneless. Men carrying tools froze mid-step, their eyes wide, gasping for breaths that would never come. The lake's whispering breeze turned into a silent executioner. The village died without a scream, as if the air itself had betrayed them. By morning, Nyos lay still. A haunting silence cloaked the village. Bodies slumped where they had fallen, faces pressed into dirt roads, hands curled mid-reach. No signs of struggle, just stillness. Even the birds in the trees lay strewn like fallen leaves. When the French scientists arrived days later, they found the lake an eerie shade of brown. No fish stirred. The forest surrounding it lay flattened, as though the earth itself had exhaled and wiped it away. Yet there was no fire, no flood, only the thick absence of life. A man on the research team whispered, "It's like the air forgot how to breathe," and perhaps it had. That night, as the researchers set up camp, one awoke to a faint sound, a rumble. He stepped outside his tent and turned toward the black expanse of the lake. It was still, quiet, but the air smelled faintly rotten. The crack in the earth was narrow and dark, a crooked mouth silently inviting the brave or the foolish. John had always been both. With his helmet scraping the limestone ceiling, he wriggled deeper into the tunnel, where each breath sounded loud and lonely. Almost there, he whispered to himself. They called it the birth canal, a tight, uncharted passage deep inside Nutty Putty Cave. It was narrow enough to crush a man's chest if he breathed too deep, yet John pressed forward, feeling the cold grip of the earth close in tighter. Then he couldn't move. It happened quickly. One twist of his hips too far, 1 inch too deep. His arms pinned under him. His legs flailed, trying to find purchase, but the tunnel ceiling bore down on him like a stone coffin. "Hey!" His voice echoed back at him in a mocking whisper. Panic surged. He couldn't breathe, couldn't turn, couldn't escape. Rescuers came. Hours passed. The pulley system squealed as it strained, but the rock wouldn't let go. "John, stay calm," a voice called down. But John knew the cave had already claimed him. The rock pressed harder against his chest. The world felt upside down, and John's mind wavered between dream and nightmare. Shadows crawled across the tunnel walls, and the earth whispered to him in grinding tones. Finally, the rescuers stopped calling. The world outside forgot about the mouth in the earth. But the cave didn't. It never forgets the ones it swallows. If you're quiet enough deep inside Nutty Putty Cave, you can still hear it. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers brushing against stone. The school bus hissed as it came to a stop on a gravel road. Jayme climbed aboard like she had 100 times before, her breath fogging the frigid morning air. It was just a normal day. She sat near the window, staring out into the endless woods, unaware of the eyes that had found her. He sat in his car, engine running, watching her. A stranger she'd never spoken to, never seen. From 100 feet away, he decided. That night, the sound of a shotgun shattered the silence of their small Wisconsin home. Jayme woke to screaming and thudding footsteps. Her parents' voices turned to echoes in her ears, brief, final. Then, heavy boots came up the stairs, and the door to her room splintered open. He said nothing, just grabbed her arm, dragged her into the cold, and stuffed her into the trunk of his car. For 88 days, the world forgot her. The snow fell thick and silent outside the window of the place where he kept her. Jayme didn't know where she was. She didn't know why. He would sit in the next room, breathing heavily, as if the quiet house itself was alive. No chains, no bars, just his presence, always there. "Don't run," he said one night, his voice a low growl. She didn't answer. And one frozen afternoon, when the silence felt heavy enough to crush her, she ran. She didn't look back at the house, didn't look into the trees. She stumbled into the road, her bare feet burning in the snow, and found the woman walking her dog. "It's okay," the woman whispered, wrapping Jayme in her coat. "You're safe now." But was she? Because Jayme knew the truth. There was no reason she had been chosen. No warning, no plan, no way to see it coming. One moment she was a normal girl in a normal town. The next, her life belonged to a stranger. And somewhere out there, more strangers were watching, because all it takes is one decision, one look, one moment. The barrel sat in the corner of the basement, rusted and silent. No one remembered when it first arrived, only that it had always been there, heavy, unmoving, forgotten. Decades passed. Owners came and went, each dismissing the barrel as junk, too cumbersome to lift and too mundane to matter. Yet something about it felt wrong. The way shadows seemed to pool around its base, the faint, acrid smell that never quite faded. In the summer of 1999, the new owner, a middle-aged man eager to clear out the old house, decided to deal with it. With a grunt, he pried the lid open. A stench rolled out, thick, putrid, ancient, and then he saw her. The remains were preserved in the dark, viscous chemicals at the barrel's bottom. A woman, her arms curled protectively around her swollen belly, as though guarding a secret even in death. Her hair clung to her skull like black silk, and her teeth, frozen in a grimace, seemed to smile at him. Police traced the barrel back through time. 1969. A young woman, Reyna, who vanished without a trace. An affair, a pregnancy, a threat to tell. Her boss silenced her, stuffed her into the barrel, and sealed her fate beneath layers of dust and decades of lies. When the police arrived at the old man's door to arrest him, they found him swinging gently from the rafters, his final escape. DNA had confirmed everything. In her late 80s, Reyna's mother received the news. With trembling hands, she held her rosary and whispered, "I knew." For 30 years, the dreams had haunted her. Her daughter crying out in the dark, trapped in a place she could not escape. A metal container. Reyna's voice echoed through her sleep, muffled and pleading. Now the barrel was gone, emptied and discarded. But at night, when the house was still, the new owners swore they could hear it. The faint scraping of fingernails against metal. A hollow sound carried through the walls. The weight of the barrel was gone, but its secret still lingered. Some things are never meant to be opened. The first strike shook the ship like the wrath of a giant. Metal screamed, fire roared, and the world outside turned to chaos. In the dark belly of the USS West Virginia, 3 men scrambled as seawater began to surge, sealing corridors like tombs. "Close it," one of them shouted as the bulkhead door slammed shut with a final metallic thud. Silence followed, the explosions outside muffled, the waters gurgling, creeping closer. When the pounding on the other side of the door stopped, they knew they were alone. Days passed. Darkness became their world. They rationed their supplies, tin cans of food, sips of stale water. The air was thick and bitter, metallic from the ship's own wounds. "It's only a matter of time," whispered one man, his voice cracking. They scratched days onto the metal wall with a piece of wire, counting the hours, the moments. December 7th, 8th, 9th. Days blurred, stretched endlessly. Hope shrank with each breath. They listened. Sometimes they thought they heard footsteps, voices calling from outside. Rescue or ghosts wandering the corridors of the dead. The banging started then. At first it was faint, just taps echoing through the walls. The 3 men pounded back, desperate for a reply, but none came. The noises grew louder, sharper, like fists slamming on iron. "Who's there?" one man whispered into the black. The others hushed him. They all knew. The banging wasn't coming from outside. December 15th. The food ran out, the water nearly gone. The walls pressed closer every day, the dark too thick to escape. One man sobbed softly in the corner, a sound that faded into the heavy stillness. December 23rd. The scratching of the calendar stopped. The last mark had been made. When the salvagers cracked open the ship 6 months later, they found the bodies, curled together in a rusted corner, faces frozen in grim resolve. Around them lay empty cans, empty bottles, and the scratched calendar. And though the ship was silent, some claimed they still heard it. Faint banging echoing through its rusted halls. Desperate hands still pleading for rescue that would never come. The knock on the door shattered the quiet. HG blinked awake, hearing heavy voices and footsteps she didn't recognize. Then came the sound of wood splintering. The door kicked open. Her heart slammed in her chest as strangers stormed the room, faces hard and voices sharp. They held guns, their cold commands stripping away any sense of safety. Her friends were dragged from their beds one by one. Soon, the 5 of them sat huddled together in the dim bedroom, their clothes gone, their dignity ripped away. Guns pressed to their temples as demands were barked, cruel laughter punctuating the air. The men moved with practiced cruelty, as if rehearsed for moments like this. HG couldn't stop shaking. the others barely holding back tears. The hours stretched, blurring into a nightmare where time had no meaning. Finally, they were forced outside. The night was sharp, the frozen December wind biting at their bare skin. The fields stretched endlessly, a void of snow and ice beneath a merciless sky. "Run," one of the men said. They didn't get far. The sound of gunshots shattered the air. One after another, her friends fell. Jason, Brad, Aaron, Heather, all of them crumpling into the frost-covered ground. HG's turn came next. A flash, the crack of a gun. Pain seared her skull, then nothing. But she woke. The air was heavy and still, snowflakes drifting around her as she lay motionless, her body stiffening from the cold. The world was silent except for the soft howl of wind. Blood dripped into her eyes, blurring her vision as she struggled to breathe. Somehow, her limbs moved. She crawled forward, then stumbled to her feet. The field stretched ahead like an endless white ocean. Naked and bleeding, HG ran. The frozen ground tore at her bare feet. The world swam in and out of focus, but still, she ran. A glimmer appeared in the distance, tiny pinpricks of light, warm and soft against the dark. Christmas lights. Her breaths came in ragged sobs as she pounded on the door of the house, leaving bloody handprints on the wood. A woman opened it, gasping as she beheld HG, bare, broken, and pleading for help. HG collapsed at her feet. The police came. The men were caught. But the house where it happened, the triplex where her friends had laughed, watched TV, and fallen asleep dreaming of their futures, stayed dark and quiet, forever frozen in that night. And every December, HG still sees the lights, the lone beacon that saved her in a sea of darkness.